Is it on? Good afternoon, Warren. Thank you for coming over to the offices here.
Good afternoon, thank you.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to have you here. You know, it's not very often that we get such an important painting coming to us. Paintings of this quality only comes around every couple of years. So we're very excited about this oil work of Irma Stern, this particular nude, which is very unique and a very compelling painting. The question arises now, who could the sitter be? Do you have any ideas on that?
Well, I can put it this way. As you know, I've seen painting on a number of occasions now, having gone into the offices. And I was immediately taken by firstly the scale and the wonderful palette and just the power of the particular painting. So I gave it some careful thought and looked at it, but immediately what came to mind, and I mentioned to Irma right away, I worked at Stefan Wels when he was still in Rosebank 26 years ago. And a very important nude painting, actually a double nude, female nude painting, was offered. It was in August of 1990. It was lot 258. And although they titled the painting, which was done in 1941, so it's 4 years before this painting, although it was titled Two Nudes, I remember the discussion very well at the time, and what was debated, or what was actually confirmed from the seller, who was a very prominent art dealer down at Cape Town, a Irma Stern specialist. The two people in the painting were Rosa van Gelderen and her partner and her lover, Hilda Pavitsky. Now, that was very interesting to me. I didn't have any context to those names and who these people were, and I found it fascinating all the same, and I remember this. And then on my next leave, I went down to see my mom. She lives in Cape Town, in the Sea Point, and I happened to mention this painting, how much I liked it, and I mentioned the names. My mom was visibly sort of taken. I could see that it made a sort of connection.
Yeah.
And I said, Mom, what is it? What's the context? And she said, well, her first teaching job, she sort of started down in Cape Town as a primary school teacher in about 1950 after she graduated. And the head mistress of the school where she was in Fred Hook was Rosa van Gelderen. So she told me lots of important and very interesting stories about who Rosa van Gelderen was. A very prominent educator, very connected in the social in the community, but also culturally a very important dynamic figure. So she and Hilda Pavitsky were friends. That's recorded in all the Stern books from as early as 1923, and they remained best friends right through their lives. And then what became clear is that Irma Stern actually painted, particularly Hilda Pavitsky, quite a number of times. So just to use one example, a very prominent example, I'll just hold this up for the camera. This is Marion Arnold's A Feast for the Eye. Irma Stern was published by the Rembrandt Foundation in 1995. And literally a photograph taken in the Irma Stern Museum in her studio. They've used this photograph to be the frontispiece next to the preface of Marion Arnold's, right on page 8. And the caption is very interesting, and it says, the painting on the easel is a portrait of Rosa van Gelderen. It was painted in 1929. And Stern became friends with Rosa van Gelderen and Hilda Pavitsky in 1923. At the time of Stern's Golden Jubilee in 1964, Rosa wrote, for 41 years we have been friends. And with all the ups and downs, we are still friends, and I wish you now, my dear, good health, peace of mind, and many more painting years. And I just thought, that's significant, number one. Then I took a good look at the portrait. I've been to the Irma Stern Museum a number of times. I didn't, formally remember it. And you can see that there's a very, very strong likeness between the portrait of Rosa van Gelderen in the Irma Stern Museum and this portrait over here. Obviously, quite a number of years have gone by, probably 15, 16 years. So the sitter is now a little heavier than previously. But one can see in the hair, the brow, particularly her prominent nose, her nice olive skin, that there's a very good chance that this is Rosa van Gelderen. On the contrary, if it isn't Rosa van Kelderen, I did feel immediately in looking at the portrait when I first saw it that Stern had to be very intimate and know the sitter very, very well because of the luxuriousness of the painting, but also the sitter being at such ease. It's not a typical pose for a nude. And so it's definitely someone that was very well known to Stern and in her circle, I'm sure, of friends.
Just composition-wise, it's a very interesting work itself, especially the pair of shoes in the right-hand corner. What do you think the implication of that could be?
Well, it's interesting. I mean, I did think about that. In the beginning, I wasn't thinking along the lines of Rosa van Kelderen, but I did immediately think that the sitter was certainly someone who was very privileged, who was wealthy. I mean, it could also be a wealthy patron of Irma Stern's, and it immediately meant that the person had a very distinctive eye. I mean, obviously, just for luxury and for fashion, obviously, possibly had a fetish for shoes. And it's a very interesting compositional device that I haven't seen in, certainly haven't seen in an Irma Stern painting before.
Yeah, yeah.
And also one, I think it's important to say, one can see how well groomed the sitter in the painting is. She's got fabulous hair, excellent skin, she's in very good health, I mean, excellent tan and good colour. And I think it's a very, very beautiful and luxurious painting that draws you in. Literally, with every viewing, you seem to see more in the painting.
Yeah.
I mean, the sheer size of it alone, you know, sort of grabs you when you look at it.
Well, it's definitely a very, I mean, the scale, I agree with you on that. I mean, you can see that Stern, not just for the sitter. Let's say it wasn't commissioned and she did this friend a favour. Let's say it was Rosa van Kelderen. This meant a tremendous amount to Stern if it was something that came from her side.
Yeah.
And if it came the other way around as a commission, it was taken very seriously because it is a very striking painting. It's very important, has a lovely scale, it won't be missed in any context, in any location, whether it's in a museum or a private collection. And I think also one thing I just wanted to say, I've been lucky, you know, working in the auction business initially, but like you as well, seeing hundreds and eventually thousands of examples of certain artists' works like Irma Stern and Penyeff and so on. I've been very aware of the nude as an important aspect of Irma Stern's work, even though it's not something that's really featured predominantly in many private collectors' collections that I've seen. And one can illustrate this very quickly. This was a retrospective of her work, Expressions of a Journey, done at Standard Bank, I think in 2003 or 2004. And this was very interesting. Here's a lovely gouache of also quite a voluptuous woman. Obviously, this much smaller in scale, being a gouache. It's only about 51 centimeters, also quite big. It is in the Irma Stern Museum. But the interesting thing, they dated it circa 1945. So it's precisely the same vintage as this.
Yeah.
And then if one looks at any of, for collectors, you look at any of your Irma Stern books, you'll see that she was doing nudes already in the pre-1920. Then in the 20s, the 30s, the 40s, 50s, and the 60s. So it's definitely, I think, an important aspect of her work that collectors need to look at, rather than thinking, gosh, this isn't an exotic African subject, I'll pass it, or look at something else.
Fantastic.
If one just consider the value of this work, do you have any opinion about it?
Well, I have to be honest, as you can see, I have my glasses on. I only wore glasses, been wearing glasses for the last 2 years, so I don't see things very well, but it's short range. And I walked in and saw the painting, and I mean, literally sort of blew my socks off. I was like, wow, that's a fantastic painting. So immediately I walked back to the reception desk and reached for a catalogue. And I didn't have my glasses, put my glasses on. I really thought I wasn't seeing things correctly. So it's just an opinion, but I honestly thought this painting would be valued at more than it is. So, at a bottom estimate of 10 million, I mean, I really think, just put it in this way, there's an exceptional, for someone who likes this kind of painting, there's exceptional value here. Because in my mind, a painting like this, feels like it could reach double that.
Yeah.
You know, so I think it's certainly a very, very important painting. It has all the qualities: the scale, the composition, the palette. It's fabulous.
No, I certainly believe that there's still a lot of margin for Irma Stone's works, especially if you compare the quality of her work with her contemporaries in Europe, the expressionists that painted in Germany at the time. Their values are much, much higher.
Mm.
Yeah, I think this would be a showstopper in anybody's collection. Good luck to the person who gets it.
Lucky person.
Yes. Good. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very
Thanks,
much.
Lauren.
Pleasure.